You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! There's the television. All right there. All right there. Look, listen, real friend. This is politics at its finest. This is where the rubber meets the road.
Why, oh why didn't I take the blue pill?
Okay, welcome back to the third installment of Deconstructing Truth. I hope by now you're beginning to realize that there are certain things we just can't know. And what's happening is people are building an entire worldview based on their interpretation of things that we just can't know. This is done in order to sell you this worldview. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm simply saying you can't know that it's right. So to build a worldview on it, in my opinion, is wrong. And to teach it to our children as though it's fact, that's wrong. And to sell it to each and every one of us, constantly driving it into our heads through television programming and just, a bunch of different specials, it's just wrong. Why don't we just be honest? Well, in this episode, we're going to deal with the age of the Earth and universe. So buckle up. All right, let's talk about the light argument. That's probably the most popular argument that we see out there when you go and you look up the age of the universe. And it goes something like this. We see stars that are farther away than 6,000 years. They're X amount of light years. And a light year is how long it takes for light to travel from one point to another. That's what a light year is. So we see them so far away that it couldn't possibly be closer. Well, here's the problem with that. Everywhere I've looked, the universe is anywhere between 13 and 15 billion years old. That's the accepted age. We see stars farther away than that, too. So the problem exists in both sides. So one side can't take it farther than the other. I mean, if it's farther away, it's farther away. Here's the other problem. Light is not a constant. How do I know this? Well, if you look it up, you can see in the laboratory, they've sped it up, they've slowed it down. If you sped it up, slowed it down, they've even stopped it. If you've done these things, it's not a constant. So every formula, equation, whatever you want to call it, that has light listed as a constant is wrong. It is in error. You might get the correct answer if nothing interfered with your light going from one thing to another that you're measuring. But out in space, you have no idea if there is something between the Earth and that star that could be affecting the light. No idea. So it's moot. You can't use it as an argument. It can't be used to measure it because it's not reliable. You don't know if anything's affecting it. You just don't. All right, let's talk about stars. What are stars? Well, we don't know. Now, we believe that the stars are like our sun and that there are other little solar systems, and I'm not disputing that at all. Not disputing that at all. In fact, that's what I believe. But truth is not determined by popularity or belief. No one has gone out to one to confirm that. So you can't put it in the fact column yet. Now, it's commonly believed we know. Well, let's take the sun. Do you know what it's made out of and exactly how the processes are working inside the sun? We have a very good idea, and they're probably right. But if you can't go out and test it, can you really put it in the fact column? There could be forces at work there that we just don't know and don't understand yet. Now, what they say is they can look through these certain lenses and they can see the colors of the stars. And from those colors, you can determine the gases that are going through their little burning cycle there. Here's the thing though, is there any way for you to, with evidence and proof, guarantee there is nothing between Earth and that star that's affecting the color of that light? Because they're using the colors of the lights to determine the gases. No one can guarantee that. No one can prove that. Therefore, you can't put it in the fact column yet. That's my only point. Now, I totally believe in the whole thing they're selling about the stars and the solar system. I'm in total agreement with that. I don't determine truth, though. But here's the thing. Here's why I'm saying this. You see, we've been sold this story on dinosaurs, and there's very good reason to doubt the age that they lived in. We found C14 in their bones, we found soft tissue, we found DNA, we found red blood cells in their bones. All of these indicate a very good reason to question the age in which they lived. Everybody, well, most everybody, believed this whole story. They believed these scientists. Unfortunately, belief does not equal truth. If it did, we'd all still be Christians or we'd all be Muslims, because those are pretty popular. If it was just the number of people with belief that made it true, wouldn't that be the truth? I think there's more Muslims now than anything. You can't assign a different set of rules to something. Well, we like this, so if we all believe it, it must be true. You just can't do that. That's not how life works. I mean, you can do it, living in your matrix, but it's not reality. I'll discuss the whole dinosaur thing in a little later segment here. But that's my point. We all believe this, and like I said, I believe it too. But I understand that since we can't go out there and look, and we can't prove it, and we can't, I can't put it in the fact column yet. 10 years from now, there might be a discovery that changes that whole story. I shouldn't be surprised by it. I shouldn't be caught unawares by it, because I should have an understanding that, okay, we believe this, but no one's been able to go out and confirm it yet. Okay, we're going to discuss now the geologic column. What is that? Well, you see all these layers in the dirt. And in these layers, that's where they generally find fossils and artifacts, but the ground is layered. The layers are facts. The interpretations to explain that, there's two main ones. You have the long age theory, where these layers were laid down by time, and you have the creation young earth theory, that they were laid down by the water of Noah's flood. What's the evidence? Which one is right? Well, the evolutionary long age one, that it took a lot of time to deposit this, what are the facts that support that? All facts are interpreted. You have to believe that it took a long time. There's no evidence. No one sat and watched layers form. We haven't seen that. We haven't observed that. That's a belief. Is it a possibility? Sure, because we've never observed the ground long enough to see that it doesn't work that way. Could it? Sure. Is it a fact? Is it indisputable? Is there? Absolutely not. We've never observed it. So if you want to believe it, great, good on you. You can't prove it. Now for the young earth creation theory, do we see water making layers? Oh, absolutely. So that's definitely a possibility, but a possibility is not necessarily how it happened. Like my earlier example with the 10 guys and the gun and the dead body. Just because you can explain how something could have happened does not mean that's the way it absolutely happened. That's just one possibility. For example, I'm going to give you this example. If you go look up the Toutle River by Mount St. Helens, if you go look at the pictures, it looks like a carbon copy of the Grand Canyon on a smaller scale. That happened overnight. After that volcano blew and washed out the one causeway for the one river, it blew through there overnight, and in one night you had a deep canyon with tons of layers. That we've observed. That's a fact. It can happen that way. You see, and this is why I've made this series. See, if you go to read comments in a lot of these debates, what you see is a lot of bashing, especially against these young earthers in this area. And I don't understand that mentality. We've observed this, and so we believe it. But everyone's in support of what's not been observed, and the people who believe what they've observed, well, they're just stupid. That's the problem that I have. That's what I'm coming out against. I don't care what you believe, but don't bash somebody else, especially when the evidence is on this side. Why are you bashing them? And I'm not saying, as I said, that that's how it happened, but there's a very good reason to believe that's how it happened. We've observed it. I mean, to me, it's akin. You guys are stupid. I don't see. That to me is what I see when I read those types of comments. I'm not saying everybody's like that. It's I guess a select group within that group that does the bashing. You know, just like anywhere else. You've got stupid Christians who write posts, you stupid evolutionists. I don't agree with that. As soon as I read that, I immediately go read something else, because that's an indicator of that person's mentality. They're not seeking truth. They're trying to prove what they already believe, and I'm just not into that. We're all searching together, and we should really support each view. To me, as long as it's reasonable, you should support it, right? That's free thought, isn't it? You see a lot of things about free thought and critical thinking. Isn't that an example of it, when all reasonable views are allowed to have a voice? That's what bugs me. I got an idea. Let's stop promoting these layers for long periods of time as a fact. Let's stop. Just stop it. If you want to believe it, that's fine. If you want to present that as this is something we believe in, that's fine. But don't present it as though it's a fact. Don't tell people they have to learn it, but no other way it could have happened. Don't learn anything else, just this way. That's mind control. That's what I'm against. All right, now we're going to talk about radiometric dating. A lot of people like to point to that and use that as proof for an old age. There's some problems with that, though. In all of the different forms of radiometric dating, it depends on a decay rate. So you start with so much, it decays at a certain rate of speed, which we can measure very accurately. And from that you can extrapolate how old it's been there. There's a problem, though. And here's the problem with all of these. Number one, you don't know how much was in it when you started. If you did, you'd already know the date of the rock. So you would have tested it before when it first formed. But you don't have that to test. You don't know what it started with. Now I could be wrong on this, I think it's the potassium argon dating, where they used lava flow rocks and they assume that it starts with 0. and from there they date it. Well, that's great in theory, but in practice, if you go look it up, you can see where they get crazy numbers right after volcanic eruptions. So it doesn't work that well. That's assumption number one. How much product did you start with? You don't know. Number two, was it ever contaminated? Especially if it sat there as long as some of these claims say. I mean, it sat there for a long time. Nothing contaminated during that time? You don't know. Number three, the decay rate. Has it always been the same? We don't know. They measure it for a specific amount of time and then they extrapolate that. You don't know if the rate was always constant. You just don't. These are assumptions they have to make. If you have to make these assumptions in your equation, it's not a fact. It's a belief. You believe that it's the right answer, but you don't know that it's the right answer. I'm sure anybody that works out these formulas and stuff, if you're assuming these three things in your equation, you don't have a fact. It's not an exact science. It's still pretty new, and there's still a lot of problems with it. I'm not saying those problems won't be worked out at some point. All right, here's an example of some of the problems that occur in a dating system and how it can affect the truth of what we've been told and what we're being expected to believe. And this is going to maybe shock some people, maybe upset some people, but I don't know about you, but I just want the truth. In 2012, at the, I went and looked it up, at the Western Geophysics meeting in Singapore, a group of researchers had done some research, and there was a presenter that went up, and he presented evidence. Apparently he had everything all worked out. These guys had really studied this well and done a lot of tests, and he had all the data to prove this. They tested 8 dinosaur bones. All 8 were found to contain C14. Now, of course, I kind of, as I said, there's problems with datings, so I don't accept these, but they dated between 22 and 39,000 years old. Now, if you know anything about C14, the half-life, it decays really quick. You can't measure anything beyond like 100,000 years. So if you can't measure anything more than 100,000 years old, it shouldn't contain any C14. There shouldn't be any in there, and yet all 8 samples came back with C14 in them. This indicates, even if the dating is wrong, it can't be more than 100,000 years old. And this was session number 5. You can go look it up yourself. That's the 2012 Western Geophysics meeting in Singapore. Now here's the interesting thing as well. If you look at the press release as to why that was pulled, it says because the 2 chairmen, they disbelieved, or they had a problem with the findings. They didn't believe them. They wanted to confirm them. It was removed, and without the knowledge of the authors or the presenters. And it says it will not be restored. Why? Aren't you interested in truth? If you're interested in truth, then if your investigation turns out that they're right, well, why wouldn't you restore it at that point? Because there's something else behind it. They want you to believe something. Or else, why would it be a problem leaving it up? They're not just sitting there going, oh, that's interesting, look at what they found. No, they have to protect their worldview. They have to protect what's been presented to you. Why? If this is the truth of what we're finding, shouldn't we know? Shouldn't we make up our own minds? They don't want us to make up our own minds. They want us to shut up, listen, and do as we're told. I'm sorry. You can either cling to truth or stay in the matrix. It's up to you. But if they're finding C14 in these bones, we should know. I mean, that changes the whole story of dinosaurs. Doesn't that concern anyone? I want the truth. If it's millions of years, so be it. If it's thousands, man, I want to know. I want to know. I want to make my own mind up. Okay, let's talk about the fossil record. What is the fossil record? It's simply the history told by the fossils we find. It tells us about the creatures, a little bit about their environment. Some of these creatures are extinct. We don't see them anymore, so we kind of learn about these things. And it's through the fossils themselves. Here's some things I'd like to discuss about the fossil record. Number one, you know that it died. Number two, you know where it was buried. You don't know where it died. You just know where it ended up. What we don't know is the age of the item. When you look at a bone, you can find it in a layer, but since we don't know how those layers got there, we don't know if they're in any kind of an order. We believe that they are, but since we don't know how they were laid down, we don't know if they're in any kind of order. If they were laid down by water, they would pretty much be laid down at the same time. You know, as the water flowed across, it would drop the sediment, generally in weight and size. You know, that's how it would sort them. What we don't know is the age. I mean, you can assign an age to a layer, but generally what they do is they say, well, this layer is this old because of the fossil. And how do you know the fossil, you know, is this old? Well, because we found it in this layer. It's usually circular reasoning, and I know that's argument's been thrown out there a lot, but it's valid, you know. Okay, here's a couple of quick mentions. Dendrochronology, which is the tree rings. Yeah, that was shown a long time ago to be more seasonal than annual. When they check them with the known age and they count the rings, they don't add up. So it's kind of silly to assume in a tree you didn't count the rings in before that it would add up correctly. There's a lot of research done on that. You can read about that, but it's not accurate if you're using it as an annual thing. Much like the ice rings or the ice layers. Those are not annual. Those indicate warm, cold, warm, cold, warm, cold seasons. And you can get several of those in a year. If you don't believe me, go read about the Lost Squadron. Those planes which were lost in World War II. There should have only been I think they went in the 90s and dug them up. So you figure there should have been maybe 50-something layers. Turned out there were many thousands, maybe a million, I don't know. You can go read. I read about it like 10 years ago. But you can go read about that. It's very interesting. Those are not things you can use as indicators for any type of aging because they're just not accurate. So to list them, in my estimation, if you list those as some kind of an evidence, you clearly do not even understand the argument. They can't be used. If there's that kind of problems with them, you can't use them. I hope you get from this that I'm not pushing any age at all. I'm merely pointing out that we have no way of really knowing outside of historical documents that we find, and even those are questionable because you don't know if the author's lying or not. So you really have no idea. I mean, other than more modern written record, we don't know. We don't know how old this world is, this universe. We have no method that we have yet that can empirically prove anything as far as age. And I'm not trying to push for one or another. I'm trying to show you that, dude, take your pick. Really, take your pick. And people who because I know the young Earth thing is not, it's not popular. I mean, think about that. It's just not popular. You know, oftentimes today they criticize, you know, the older scientists for believing that. And that was, you know, that was the common belief. And, you know, back then they would mock people who thought differently than their common worldview. Now we have another common worldview, and we're acting the same way. Don't let somebody bully you into believing one thing or another, because there's really no direct evidence that I've been able to find. Everything is interpretive. I mean, you can interpret it a certain way, but the reason there's a debate is because there are so many questions that just haven't been adequately answered. That's why the debate exists. You know, I mean, think about it. You got two different groups of scientists. One's a larger group, and then you have a smaller group, because there are scientists who view the world and universe as being young. So what we have is two groups of scientists, and people tend to pick one side or the other. And then you see in the comments that, you know, people make claims that, you know, a particular group isn't really scientists. My question is, what qualifies them to make that decision? Because they have the same degrees, they work in the same field. The only thing different is their belief system. I'm pretty sure that shows ignorance on the part of the commenter. They don't like what they're hearing, so they attack the person and their degrees, and that's not an indicator of seeking truth. That's an indicator of trying to promote your worldview. You found someone who agrees with what you believe, and so you cling to them. But both sides have valid points, valid arguments, and they point out different problems. It's not settled, and that should be okay. See, in a society where that's not okay, that's an indicator of a problem. That's an indicator of free thought being squashed in a way. You know, it really is. And you hear, I mean, I've read a lot of posts and things, and as soon as they started off those stupid creationists or those stupid evolutionists, I don't even read any further. I already know where they're going with it. And it's really just it's just an attack on the person. It offers nothing to the argument. I mean, these people just, they're prophesizers. They're pushing their belief system. That's really all it is. And we shouldn't put up with that. As soon as someone makes that comment, if everybody else would jump on that person about their attitude, I think it would change, but I don't think that's going to happen either. Most people, myself included, other than this video system, I don't even bother with those boards, because those people are unreasonable. They wouldn't care to know the truth if it hit them in the head. They have zero interest in the truth. None. And I think it shows from the types of comments they make. That's the problem I have, is there's a lot of people like that. And as soon as I read that, I tune them out. I go to a different one. I want to read the evidences. Okay, I think we're going to end this here. This wasn't meant to be something, an exhaustive study of this. There's a lot of different videos you can watch with people a whole lot smarter than me who give different evidences for both sides. And I'm not trying to prove or promote either side. I'm simply saying there are quite obviously a lot of problems with both views. There's quite obviously a lot of things that are in debate. And because of that, we should be able to openly discuss these things without trying to cut each other's throats. We should be able to seek truth freely. That's the whole point of this. People shouldn't be getting so upset. In fact, they wouldn't be getting so upset. I don't think if there wasn't something else behind it. And by that I mean I think it's not so much two belief systems as it is two religions at war. They're colliding. And that's why people with such religious fervor defend and yell at each other and call each other names, and because it happens on both sides. I've seen both sides being real nasty to one another. When really, I mean, it's all about questioning and being able to freely question. And if the answer doesn't meet the needs, then it shouldn't be accepted as an answer. You know, there's so many things that just don't add up. And I think that's an indicator that at this point in time, we don't know. So pushing either side as fact is wrong. It shouldn't be done in a society that's seeking truth, in a society that really wants to know its history and what's going on and how old is it. Saying we don't know should be okay. It really should. Exploring both sides should be okay. Why isn't it? I think that's a bigger question. Why is this not okay to look into?
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! There's the television. All right there. All right there. Look, listen, Neil, Fred.
This is politics at its finest. This is where the rubber meets the road.
Why, oh why didn't I take the blue pill?